What's happening, everybody? Pragmatic Addict here. This is going to be my review of the new Taiwanese horror film on Netflix, Incantation. So I only heard about this film just a few days ago, but ever since I heard about it, I've been really interested in it. I thought the trailer was done really well. This is being labeled as the most terrifying Taiwanese horror film ever made, and the highest grossing for that matter. Now, I went in this film with some interesting thoughts. So Netflix has an interesting, a pretty interesting track record when it goes to them saying, oh, this is the, quote, most scariest film or the most terrifying film. You know, most notably Veronica, which we all know how that movie actually turned out. But this film, it is the most highest grossing Taiwanese horror film, and it is, yes, being labeled as the most terrifying Taiwanese horror. And when you watch this trailer, it's set up in a really interesting way, as the movie is. So, yeah, let's get into Incantation, everybody. So I thought the film opened up in a really interesting way. It starts off with these, like, mind games and almost like these, like, stimulation kind of tests. About how the mind can work. You know, it does this thing where it's like, it shows like a picture of a Ferris wheel, and then it, you know, kind of like says like, you know, use your mind to make it go left or right. Same thing with the train going backwards and forwards, and I was just kind of like, what is this? Is this an interactive fucking horror? And what's interesting is that, in a way, this does kind of feel like an interactive horror. So after we get that kind of like a setup, we're then introduced to this woman who is recording herself stating her business about how she summoned this curse 6 years ago, this religious taboo. And what I really liked about this movie, at least in the beginning anyway, is that this really does, you know, do a pretty decent job at getting the audience not only like reeled in, but does a really interesting job in doing so. Again, it does do this kind of like an interactive route. You know, we see that kind of like setup with the mind games at the beginning, and then it goes a little bit forward, doing some more experiments with the audience, which I thought was really cool. This film is also kind of like displayed into different chapters, and in saying that, there is kind of like, I'm not going to say two stories going on, but there are two different timelines going on. So the movie in present day, which is where it is set, centers on a mother and a daughter who move into their new home. And as we're navigating through these characters, this mother and this daughter, strange things are happening in the home. And as the movie goes on, we're flashback to like 6 years ago, where this curse actually began and how everything kind of escalated and why. And going back to the beginning really quick and kind of like going into the movie itself, as far as like the intro goes, besides like the little interactions that they do with the audience, there are some scenes right off the bat where I was just like, oh shit, you're not going to take any punches, are you, movie? Now, I'm not going to spoil what that is, or, you know, those scenes that take place, but I will say, I mean, just as an intro to a movie, not only like with the interactions again, but with all the stuff that they actually included in this intro, just as a setup, I thought it was really well done, to the sense where it almost feels like it was from a different writer. Like, at the beginning of that movie, I'm just like, oh shit, let's go. Alright, Netflix might actually not be fucking teasing us. And I will say, the rest of the film does take a different route. So, getting to the actual film itself, it is kind of set up like a found footage horror, but also like a documentary in a sense. It's being labeled as a found footage horror, but it doesn't actually feel like your typical like bullshit found footage horror film. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, you know, there are like you know, a lot of moments throughout the film where, you know, it'll show you like different interviews and different recordings of people and things that happened 6 years ago that make everything tie together. But in the sense of like a found footage horror, it feels tighter. It feels stronger. It feels, you know, better produced. It feels more cared about. Just as a found footage horror, it feels so much different in like a professional sort of way. But one thing I want to talk about a lot is the characters. So most notably, you know, yes, the mother and the daughter. So as actresses, and even to some degree, even as characters, the mother and daughter are, you know, very adorable. They're, you know, I think decently fleshed out. And I think, again, as actresses, they put on some really good performance. And, you know, again, with their story arcs, I think that as individual characters, they're interesting enough. But a big issue I had with this was the actual dynamic between the mother and daughter. Their dynamic came off very janky, and it was easily the most concerning and kind of like, I guess, distracting aspect of the movie to me, especially considering that is, the most important, like, piece of the story here is this mother and daughter's relationship. Just the way that they interact with or introduced, it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel right to me at all. Like, the way that they're set up, and not even that, but just throughout the film, they're set up in this mysterious kind of ominous way, which is fine, especially for this horror with this background, but just as, again, the dynamic, the relationship between them, it didn't feel as concrete as, or as, again, natural as it should have been. Another thing I want to talk about too is the scares. Like, before going into more of the characters, I want to talk about the scares for a moment really quickly. And I will say this, while I didn't find the film particularly scary at times, or like didn't find myself scared of this movie, I will say there is a variety of scares in this movie, and they're actually pretty consistent throughout the movie, which is almost a 2-hour film, which, again, they didn't actually have a massive effect on me, but I will still respect them, especially in the regard of a found footage horror film. I would say at least for like the first, good chunk of the movie, maybe halfway through, a lot of these scares don't feel, overdone. They don't feel abused or overused, and they don't even feel cheap, really, for that matter. And I would say, like, as a horror film, as far as the scares go, at least for, like, creativity aspect and, like, a variety, fashion, they're actually done really well. That's probably, like, aside from the actual feel of the movie and some of the storytelling, I think that the scares are actually probably equally as, well done. And now I will say this, so this film was being compared to other, foreign horrors like, The Ring or The Grudge, and it does kind of feel like that. This, in the sense of, like, this is just this mother and her, child navigating through their day-to-day, lives in, the city, and, it's kind of like this gloomy, rainy kind of setting, throughout the film. So, again, it does resemble those kind of, like, films in that degree, and it does feel 100% inspired by those kind of films. Now, going back to the characters, because I did not want to forget to talk about this. Going back to the characters, so I have more or less a pretty debatable amount of criticism towards pretty much all the supporting or filler characters. A lot of these filler or supporting characters do actually feel like that in an actually cliche way, which was really upsetting, because they're actually involved in quite a bit, not just in the story setting, but even like as a movie. These are characters that should have been just as important and are just as relevant as the actual leads of the movie, but it just feels like they were like typecasted or like only allowed to this certain like area of exposure for the movie. Like they like it seems like they were kind of fleshed out as supporting and filler characters, and regardless of how likable some of these characters actually were and how much they actually contributed to the story, it seems like they just weren't allowed to get fully exposed, and I felt like that was a big missed opportunity in the movie. Now, going into the film's pacing now, as a story that goes kind of back and forth between present and flashback kind of way, I will say that both stories are actually interesting and engaging enough, but it does take some time to actually get things going and to get the audience reeled in. It is 100%, that type of movie where the more it goes on, the better it actually gets, and the more, concrete it actually gets. I will say that as far as like, how the curse actually gets started and what actually ends up, resulting to that, I think that how they wrote that was actually genuinely interesting. And as a horror story as well, they actually did a lot with that. But the issue is that this is almost a 2-hour film. When you look at not even the first act of the movie, but like the first half, when you look back at that in retrospect, you kind of realize that was kind of played out for setup. And not only that, but there was a lot of struggles with that. As far as like actually getting this film all the way together and actually concluding it, piece by piece from beginning to end, you can see that there was a lot of struggles with what the writer and or director, wanted to do, how he wanted to go with his pacing, and how he wanted to actually contribute these, different timelines together, which, again, when you look back in the film as a full in retrospect, I think that it does decent, at least, but again, this is a 2-hour film. This could have easily been, suited down to 90 minutes, maybe even less. Easily. And that is because a lot of, the beginning of the movie, they don't know how to actually, they don't know what the beginning of the movie should be, or what, the center of the actual film should actually be. And that shows. And again, while there are in, each act of the film and in each storylines, interesting stuff, whether it's the horror or the storytelling, there are equally just as amount of issues. What it comes down to is like a lot of the aspects of this film, at least, the ones that are not, more, criticisms than anything, they just kind of feel like enough. Like when it comes to the horror, it's enough. It didn't scare, it didn't have a huge effect on me, but I thought, there was plenty of it that was, again, there was a variety of it. It was creative. It didn't feel as cheap as your standard found footage horror film. And as well as the story, while I think that it is a little bit janky, and while it does struggle with actually connecting it all together, there are plenty of really interesting, areas of the story as well as the characters. And again, just as an overall movie, it is interesting how it has these two timelines and how they all connect, and how they're actually like kind of, told in different fashions, where the past is kind of like, these documents and these recordings of these interviews, where the present is basically just, again, this mother and daughter going on with their lives, and the consequences from the past that this mother has to deal with that are now, affecting her daughter. I thought as an overall story and as an overall horror film even, it was definitely interesting. But while each act and each, area of the movie, whether that be the storytelling or the horror, while they do definitely have, good things about them in each act and in each, direction, there are equally just as amount of issues. And just overall, put the movie in a really weird spot for me overall. Overall, guys, I'm going to give Incantation a 4.2 out of 10. With an overall mixed review. So guys, that is going to do it for my review of Incantation. Let me know if you guys saw this film and what you thought of it. It is a very different film for me as far as how I actually feel about it, but I didn't think it was bad, and there was a lot of things that I did like about it, but just equally there were things that I just didn't feel were really necessary or just really worked. So yes, guys, that's going to do it for my review of Incantation. So I did see Thor: Love and Thunder yesterday, and I didn't do a review of it because I'm actually going to be seeing the movie today. Because much like this movie, that put me in a really weird spot, but I do want to see the movie a second time, get a better outlook on it, get a better idea of what I actually, feel as far as the movie in a grasping sort of way. So I am going to be seeing the film a second time tonight, and I would like to talk about it. So stay tuned for that, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys are having a good day. Let me know what you thought about the video as well as the movie down below for those who saw it. Take care, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.